to give the floor to the main executive. And we have a lot, Robert. Now I would like to give the floor to Andrey Denisov, First Deputy of the distinguished participants of the round table, distinguished guests of the forum. I'm happy to see all of you here in St. Petersburg, and I would like to wish all of you, the guests of this city, well, have an interesting and fruitful stay in St. Petersburg. Don't just participate in the discussions, but also visit interesting places. I would like to thank the organizers of this event. You know, when you do something 3 years in a row, it's something sustainable trend, which is becoming a nice tradition. And that's why the founding fathers of this round table, heads of the Union of Industrialists and the American Chamber of Commerce, and in Russia, all these people, they actually deserve lots of support. And this forum is a wonderful platform to discuss the broadest spectrum of the issues of economic cooperation of the US and Russia. We can see a lot of people here, which reflects great interest, which is expressed by the business circles, government agencies, and the public at large. And in 2010, we have this key issue, modernization of world economy, modernization of national economies, taking into consideration the lessons of economic crisis, and also taking advantage of the opportunities provided by the crisis, as we learned from historic materialism. I hope that Russian-speaking part of the audience didn't forget what that subject is. Well, it shows that every crisis is the way to deal with the controversial issues. You have to use the crisis in order to get rid of everything unnecessary. That's when it's possible, and also to prolong the period of economic growth, which is of cyclical nature. And at the stage of getting out of the crisis, objectively, there is an opportunity to get a longer trend of growth, but for that, you must make a real effort, especially taking into consideration the fact that the world is changing, is becoming more complicated, not just because of the crisis, but there is a re-evaluation of certain established notions and ideas. Many people understand that the world is multipolar. There are certain difficulties presented by globalization. Quite recently, people talked only about positive features of globalization, but looks like this medal has two sides. And getting back from the general ideas, I would like to say that for our country, just in this situation, what's going on in the real modern world, the task of integration into the world system is becoming more topical and more complicated, and this task is being implemented in the attempts to speed up Russia's accession to the WTO, World Trade Organization, and also we would like to have just more negotiations, steady negotiations regarding joining the OECD. And from the point of view of my ministry, I would like to say that the task of joining the WTO has been and will be one of the priorities of economic policy of Russia, although, like everything in this world, this task has become much more complicated. You know that Russia, Kazakhstan, and Belarus made the decision to create the customs union, which actually does exist. It's been existing since January 2010, and that was not a surprise, spontaneous decision. It was the result of many years of negotiations, and this process is continuing, and just in the room next door, they are discussing this issue, and I believe that they we have some heated discussions there, and we can state that the creation of the customs union is not an alternative to Russia joining the WTO. And I would like to support what was mentioned by my colleague, Mr. Hormats, and I would like to express my hope that our relations with our key partner, the US, in these negotiations will lead to some positive result in foreseeable future. And looking in general at Russian-American cooperation in the field of innovations, right here we can see lots of potential, and I believe that the speakers here today are going to mention it, and no matter what kind of potential we have, but still you have to discover the potential, you have to discover what's there. We must make serious effort of the government agencies and of the corporate sector of both countries. And we have to state that so far we, American partners, Russian partners, fail to take advantage of all the opportunities that we have to expand our bilateral cooperation. The crisis demonstrated the vulnerability of our just mutual trade, also its dependence on the situation in different markets, commodity markets mostly. And for example, last year we had 30% fall regarding export-import in all circulation of goods. That's a real serious decline in our trade. The U.S., unfortunately, not in the group of first 10 investors in the Russian economic system. And now Russian investments grew last year $6.5 billion, but in other countries, $454 billion, Japan, $260 billion. So our numbers look more than modest, but for us, this number is still important, and the trend is there, and we hope that the trend is going to remain there. We have certain success stories, a list of success stories, the projects that are developing in 2009, beginning of 2010, and of course we are optimistic about the situation, although we don't understand the statistics is not everything, and lists of more or less important successful projects are not enough, but the systemic task that we face, that Russian economy faces, this is the transition to innovation development, implementation of innovations. This is our national strategic task, which is actually is in harmony with the course the government of the Russian Federation is trying to promote in economic and trade relations with the U.S.
Regarding the modernization thrust, as we understand, the U.S. administration is trying to put itself similar tasks. So there is some objective common ground for interaction between the United States and the Russian Federation. The contacts that took place fairly recently, the trip to Boston of a group headed by Mr. Shuvalov, and the dialogue in Moscow during the visit of American investment funds to Moscow who specialize in up-to-date, state-of-the-art technology. This is a good beginning. It's only a beginning, really a beginning. Something that is supposed to encourage future steps. Also, our relatively new opportunities are of interest to the United States. I've seen somewhere a figure of 113 RFPs under the Rosnano administration, about 40, i.e. over one-third, are RFPs from United States businessmen. My U.S. colleague here has already referred to the importance of the Presidential Commission that has been set up by our presidents, particularly the Task Force on Economic Cooperation, and hopefully with the business dialogue, U.S.-Russian Federation, to which we ascribe a lot of importance, will bring important results that'll be very instrumental towards helping us resolve the issues we're faced with. I'm sure that cooperation in high tech will be well served by the visit of our president to the United States next week, particularly the visit of the Silicon Valley, which will be a very symbolic event, a very significant one. All of us Russian participants in the dialogue would like to share the optimism of our president, who has no doubts at all about the prospects of modernization in our country. It's not a question whether or not it'll become reality. We need to turn it around fast, and we need to make it attractive to business and population at large. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrey.